Hi there, this is Carl Irwin with a tutorial. We're going to look a little bit at Polyphone, and we're going to look at editing and compiling a sound font that you probably already have available to you. That is the Fluid R3 General MIDI sound font. This is a very, very widely used sound font. It is part of the MuseScore packaging. It comes with MuseScore and has for quite some time. It is under the MIT license, and I know what you're thinking. This is a general MIDI sound font. It has some pretty generic sorts of sounds. It's a lightweight, as far as, general MIDI sound fonts go. It is supposed to be lightweight so that it operates very quickly and efficiently inside of your software, whether it be a notation platform or, a basic MIDI sequencer. But I've found that it has a number of really good sounds in it if you dig deeply, and if you aren't trying to do the normal sort of orchestral mock-up. And even if you are doing kind of the typical orchestral mock-up, I think if you dig in there and look for the unconventional sounds and layer them up, you can actually make some pretty convincing performances just from this little, sound font. Obviously, there are some better orchestral sound fonts out there that are orchestra sample specific, that have, bigger samples that are longer, a little bit more high powered, larger file size, like the Sonatina, orchestra, which has been ported to Soundfont. It's also an SFZ and has been, those sounds have been used in some other libraries too that are open source and freely available. But, for a general MIDI sound font, this is probably the best one there is that's, freely available. Now, it is licensed under the MIT license, and I just want to quickly talk about this. I'm no expert on this, but as I understand it from what I've read, that the MIT license is a fairly vague license. It is not a completely open and free license. There are some stipulations, but the stipulations are pretty straightforward. If you take a look here on the open source initiative, they have the license spelled out for us here. Essentially, it says permission is hereby granted free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of this software and associated documentation files, the software, to deal in the software without restriction, including without limitation, the rights to use, copy, modify, merge, publish, distribute, sublicense, and or sell copies of the software, and to permit persons to whom the software is furnished to do so, subject to the following conditions. So these are the conditions. The above copyright notice and this permission notice shall be included in all copies or substantial portions of the software. So it's just a liability statement so that the people who made the software aren't liable for anything imaginable under the sun. So that's the license, and it's quite an open and free license, which is why they include it here on the open source initiative. It's not a purely open source license, not Creative Commons, but pretty much, as I understand it, you can do whatever you want with this sound font, provided that you give the original licensing and pass along this little thing down here. In fact, we can do one better as we edit it. We'll actually copy this here and we'll paste it. So we'll just grab that and we'll copy it so that we can use it later. So anyway, that being said, we're going to tinker around with this sound font, and I'm gonna share it with you. That's why I'm going over that, because I'm gonna post copies of this on the video here so that you can download the work product from the session. But I encourage you to grab a copy of Polyphone and fool around with your sound fonts, compile them together, and change them. And we'll take a look at some ways to do that. So first of all, what we're going to deal with is this organ concept that you heard there. I played a demonstration for you, and I have another demonstration I'm going to play later on. I've noticed that some of these big name sample library companies have been, over the last 5 years or so, been putting out these organ sample sets. And it's interesting to me that they would do that simply because the organ is probably one of the most easily emulated sounds. and I know people will disagree with that. Particularly if you're an organist, you probably don't like me saying that. But it is true in terms of what is believable and what a person can be led to believe in terms of realism and verisimilitude and believability in the sound that they're hearing. If you think about an orchestra, trying to emulate an orchestra with samples, there's a lot going on there because there's a wide diversity of sounds. There's a human element in performing wind instruments and string instruments that changes the way the sound evolves over a very short period of time on every single note that's played. There's a wide depth of velocity between soft notes and loud notes and hard attacks and soft attacks and legato playing, staccato playing, and marcato, and all these different articulations that you get on wind instruments and string instruments. Whereas with an organ is a machine. An organ really is a form of acoustic analog computer that it has a mechanism of actuation, and it has buttons that are pressed to activate those actuations, and very simple kind of matrix of machines that is performed by a single person. It really is like playing a MIDI file, only with real pipes, with real real noise-making acoustic objects. And with that said, it's easy to emulate something like that because you turn the note on, you turn the note off, you turn the note on and you buffer it, or you unbuffer it, you cover it, you uncover it. Those are the controls, and you layer these different sounds on top of each other, and that's an organ. And it is curious to me that with a general MIDI sound font like this, one of the things that it suffers from is that with wind instruments and string instruments, when you go to play them, they start to sound like an organ because they have that limited scope of performance that you would get from an organ. And we're going to use that to our advantage here. So our goal is to create a more believable organ using the sounds that are inside of this general MIDI sound font. There already is an organ in there. If we go into the presets, let's find the organ real quick. There's actually a number of organs. There's a few different electronic type organs, but then there's also some what they call a church organ. This would be a pipe organ of some kind, and it's got a reed rank or reed organ, and then this other kind of more principled pipe type organ sound, and a number of other small types of organs, and wind generated pipe machines. So this is what we have. This is the church organ, and if we play it, that typical kind of sound. There's another version of this that's kind of buried in there. There's another church organ. If we come way down to the bottom, I think we'll find it. A couple of variations on this, but there's a church organ too. It's really the same thing. If you look at the settings, though, what they do is they take there's two iterations of it, and one of them is detuned by 12 semitones, which means it's an octave below. So you get the same sound, but it's a little bit more bassy because it's got that octave below the principal notes. And it fills it out, which is what an organ does. An organ is really a rank of pipes that plays overtones. It plays the notes of an overtone series on a particular note. So you get the note, the principal note, but then you also get other pipes that are playing other notes in the overtone series of that note, which give it a really thick, big sound. And you can either turn these ranks on or turn these ranks off using stops and whatnot. There's also different types of pipes. There are some that are more whistle-like, and then there's some that are more reed-like. And you combine and match or mismatch these pipes with some other mechanisms as well that are in there to generate various types of sounds on an organ. The full stop organ is when everything is turned on. You have all the different ranks turned on and all the different types of pipes firing all at one time. And that's sort of what this is supposed to emulate, but I don't know. I think it's lacking. It doesn't have that rasp. It doesn't have that real acoustic kind of raspiness to it that you get from the reed pipes. Now they're in there in the general sound, but it's not believable. It sounds like, it sounds like what it is. It sounds like it's a sampled set on a synthesizer. It's a very basic kind of organ sound. Now there are some other organs on here too. Let me see here. Well, we've got, I said there's these electronic type of organs, right? A rock organ, which is like a Hammond organ. Right? So that typical kind of rock 1950s, 60s kind of rock sound. Then there is a reed organ, which if we look inside how they built this, I guess it has its own preset there, its own instrument. It's just kind of like it's like an accordion kind of sound. It's emulating the sound of those reed type pipes. But it's one octave, it doesn't have that octave split. And you get down to the low notes, and you get a little bit of that vibration, but it's a little understated, I think. When you have an organ that's playing full stop, you should get that real rumble in the notes, kind of cutting right through the middle of the overtone series, and we don't really have that. There are also some other sounds on here, the accordion and the harmonica, right? And this is kind of a combination of those sounds here. Bandoneon. We're going to use these, but we're also going to pick up some other sounds too, in order to get that kind of grit that we want in our organ. We're going to pick up some other sounds. If we look through here, there is a set of saxophone sounds. Let's see if we can find them. These are reed instruments, right? But like I said, these sounds suffer the fate of an organ in that they don't have the proper evolution over a short period of time that a real person would put into an instrument. They are just a sound that is looped, a very short piece that is looped, that loops over and over again, and it just kind of sustains very mechanically. If we look at these saxophone sounds, here's the alto sax has some vibrato on it. That's pretty good, except that these samples are a little bit higher for the tenor sax. But if we look at the barysaxophone, the baritone sax, especially down here in the basement, now if you listen to that, I argue that sounds more like an organ than it sounds like a real baritone saxophone. Right, and I think if we layer this instrument on top of some of these other more organ sounds, I think we're gonna work a little bit of magic here. On top of that, we have the oboe, which is, we're kind of way down in the register here. Oboe would be more up in this register. A little bit of vibrato on that. Then there's bassoon. That's a lot like the bary sax, but it's not as cutting. So what we're going to do is we're going to steal some of these sounds, and we're going to make a new organ. Okay, a couple of different presets that sound a little bit more legit, that we think can work a little bit better. Okay, so let me walk you through this here. the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select some sounds here to export to a new sound font. So the way we do that from Polyphone is you come up here to export sound fonts. You can do this with multiple sound fonts, by the way. If you open up more than one sound font and then you go to export, it will list all of them. And then you can go through and select different presets from different sound fonts, export them into a single sound font. And what it will do is it will compile those sounds. But we're just going to work with this one right now. So let's deselect all, unselect everything. And I'm just going to deal with organ sounds right now. I have found that the rock organ is pretty useful, even though it sounds like an electronic Hammond. There's some things we can do with it that will sound a little bit more acoustic and I think fit into our project here. So we'll grab that one, we'll grab the church organ, the reed organ. We're going to grab this one here, the bandoneon. And let's grab some other sounds here. We'll get down to the woodwinds. We'll grab that bari saxophone, the oboe. We're going to grab the clarinet. We'll grab the recorder. And we're going to grab the... Let's see, do we miss anything here? Bassoon. And I think that'll do it for our purposes, but we'll grab a couple of these other woodwind instruments that really do represent parts of an organ. You have reed sounds up here. We'll grab this recorder because it's a non-vibrato flute sound, and it can represent those flute pipes in the full range. So we'll grab those as well. And I think we're good to go with that. We can always add more to it later on if we want to. Let's also, while we're thinking about it, we'll grab some of these other organs down here, at least this other, there's this other organ, and see, church organ 2, we'll hit that one as well. And maybe even this Italian accordion, we'll grab that. So I think we're good. We'll hit export, and the export was successful. That is a good thing. And let's open it. So we'll open up our exported sound. If we go to the desktop, we see that it's right here. And we'll open this up. And we'll close out the old one. And we'll start to change this. So you see that it has our presets have been organized here in the order that they were selected. We'll be changing that in a moment. And we're not going to do this all in this tutorial. I'm just going to kind of get you started so you can see how this works and then experiment on your own. Let's change some of the information here. What we want to do is we're going to add ourselves to this. So I'm going to put my name in the year 2020. And underneath where it says license under the MIT license, we're just going to go one step further. And we're going to throw in our license that we copied, just so we can see all the text related to that MIT license. I'm going to change this up here because Frank Wen is not finishing this, but we're keeping these people in there because they're the ones that compiled the original Soundfont. And given the type of license that this is not really open source without, it's not Creative Commons. We want to keep people attached so that they, will get the credit where it is due. And here we'll just put in our name, and we'll put in the current date today. And let's see, down here under product, I don't know what this product is. This is apparently some title they came up with the original one. I'm just going to put in Fluid R3 organs. And we're going to name it. Let's name our organ. I'm going to call this, so fluid, right? We're going to go one step better. I can't think of a hotter fluid than a molten fluid, right? Molten lava. So we'll call this the molten organ. And I think that does it. We can change the name of the sound font later on, but we'll just save that as it is right there. Okay, so we've got our information set. Let's take a look at presets now. So let's start with the church organ. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take actually this church organ number 2. I'm going to duplicate it. And automatically it puts it right to the top. 0, 0, bank 0, preset 0, which is good. That's where we want to be. And we'll rename this. We're going to call this full. And we're going to start with that full tilt, full stop, big, huge, massive sound. And we're gonna sequence that together here. So right now we have 2 organ sounds. One is an octave lower, which we do want that, and that's one of the reasons. That's why I picked this one rather than the other one. It just gets us halfway there already. And we need to bring in some other sounds. So let's take a look at the baritone sax. You see it has this preset called, or this instrument called baritone. And the preset for the baritone sax has various velocity type settings that cover, or various instances of the instrument that cover different key segments, and it's changing various filters so that it sounds more appropriate in those areas. We're not going to be so specific. Okay, we only need one instance of this, but we're going to use some other instruments as well. So let's go find that. We'll come up to the instruments and we're going to find the baritone. And we'll right click and then we will copy that, come down here, and we're going to paste it in. So we have that placed in, and we're going to take this down an octave. So I'm going to, under here, I'm going to hit -12, and what this will do is it will take the instrument an octave lower. And then I'm going to, just to start out, I'm going to set this for the full range. So we'll go all the way up to 127, so it's the full key range, which these others are following the full key range as well. And then for the attenuation, this is the volume, I'm going to set this at 10 because we want it to go lower. We don't want it to be, the way this works is that the closer you get to 0, the louder the instrument is. So we're gonna back this off. I'm actually gonna back these off as well. I'm gonna take this down to 5, and I'll just match this one over here. And this is trial and error, of course. But now if we select our instrument and we play it, you can start to hear the benefit of that baritone saxophone an octave lower. There is some issues, I think, as you get up into the upper register, some tuning problems, and it starts to lose the illusion. But we're much of the way there. So that's the new full preset with that baritone sax. This is the original. Right, so octaves in the low register, and then here again is the new one. Right, and you can really hear that rumbling down there, which is nice. Okay, we want to get some other sounds that are going to cut through the middle of this, and we also want to replace kind of the upper edge. So let's go to that. Let's find the bassoon preset. We're going to copy that one. I'm going to paste this in as well, and we will set the bassoon also to -12 for the tuning, so it's an octave lower. But I'm going to change the key settings here. So right around, if we open up our keyboard, we can see what key we're on, the key number. This is middle C. And also we want to set this bassoon to 10 as well for the attenuation, so it's not quite as loud. So somewhere around 60, key 60, we're going to switch over. So starting at key 60, we're going to go over to the bassoon. So the bassoon is going to pick up from key 60 up to 127. And the baritone saxophone is going to end at key number 59. Okay, so now when we play this, we hear that rumble. And then we get to C, and that softer bassoon sound is going to take over, and it's not quite as offensive. Okay, and now let's add also a let's add a sound to cut through the middle here. We'll take maybe this oboe sound. We'll copy that. And we're going to paste this into the full. And for the oboe, we're going to do something very similar. Although I'm going to move it up a little bit. We're going to start this maybe at... So we have a little bit of an overlap, maybe around key 67. We'll go key 67 up to 127. We're going to leave that at the right range. We're going to set this also to 10 for the attenuation, but we're not going to change the octave displacement. So this is giving us the reed octave that's in the proper zone for the instrument. So up here in the upper register, we have the oboe playing on pitch, and then we have the bassoon taking over an octave lower. And then we need to put something down here on the lower register. Maybe what we'll do is I'll take this bassoon and I'll copy it again, and we'll paste it in. And this bassoon is going to also get 10 dB attenuation. We're not going to lower it, but we're going to pick up where the oboe leaves off. So the oboe starts at 67. We're going to start this bassoon at key, let's see here, 0 to 66. So now what we have is we have on pitch, the oboe is from key 67 and up, but the bassoon will pick up from key 66 down, which just kind of replaces that tone with something a little bit more appropriate for the lower ranks and lower register. And notice how I don't switch all of this stuff on the same key set. I've taken the fundamental pitch by the bassoon and the oboe, and I've offset it by a few keys from the switch on the bari sax and the bassoon in the lower octave. Okay, so this is what we get. So this is our new instrument. A little bit of clipping there that we'll deal with, and then this here is the original. A little bit more cutting. Okay, so you can play around with different sounds and try to, augment this in a few ways. You do have some limitations that if you have too many things operating at one time, you can challenge the sound card or your playback, your Soundfont player. So you want to be very careful about how many simultaneous things that you have going on. But this is the gist of it. Just mix and match these different instruments and try to create something that's a little bit more of a composite compound sound that has all the, proverbial bells and whistles, no pun intended. That I say that because that's where that phrase comes from, is from the Wurlitzer, theater organ. But it's got all of the finite details that you want in your sound that maybe a basic Soundfont preset doesn't have. So we're going to do that, and then we're also going to rename some of these other presets and reorganize them and maybe tweak them a little bit. We'll create maybe a flute rank from the recorder. So you can see dealing with the recorder sound. It's got a little bit of a vibrato. You might, call this a vibrato patch or something. Probably should have grabbed, there was another sound called pan flute, I think, doesn't have any vibrato on it. But I'll show you with this here and we'll correct it later on. One thing that this is lacking is that the sounds need to have the appropriate fall off. So if you go to the bassoon patch, it ends right away, but the organ sound does not. So one thing we want to do is go into the envelopes for these, and we're just going to up the release to 1 second. So we'll do that with the bassoon patch. We'll do that with the baritone patch. And we'll do that with the oboe patch as well. So 1 second release, I'm changing that down here, and see where that gets us. Right, so. A little bit of crackle going on in there, so let's go up here, see if we can tweak these settings a little bit. Might take this back just a little bit more. Maybe bring this back to 7. Cluster, see if we get more crackling. Maybe I'll take the fundamental pitches down just a little bit. So that would be the ones that don't have the 12. So maybe take this back to 15. And this one back to 15. And you just kind of play around with this until you get... I think we've done it with that. So anyway, that's the idea. Let's take a look down here at the recorder one. So same kind of principle on this. We want to get into the sounds here and make sure that the fall off is appropriate. So it's only 0.3 seconds. We want it to be more like a second so that they match the rest of the pipes. So now when we come back to our recorder, it sounds a little bit more authentic. So we could rename that as another preset, another, a small rank or something like that. We could add an octave below. The clarinet one is a good one. This has a really bad release. This almost sounds like a mistake and you can see that how that release works. So, by the way, if your sound fonts are doing things like this, there's not lost hope. You just open it up in an editor and you can change these parameters and improve on the performance of the sound font. So let's bring this up to 1 second. And let's move the attack out just a little bit too, so it's a little softer. And this starts to sound like an organ. I mean, this is almost a good sub bass, right? Just the sound. If you ever need a sub bass to go an octave below your bass line, right? It's got that fundamental pitch, but it also has a little bit of edge to it, so it can be heard. And because we changed the envelopes, it has a slow entrance and a slow release, right? So just a simple way to get a sub bass without having to mess around with a synthesizer. Yeah, that's the idea. Italian accordion. This has kind of a weird phase thing going on. This might be useful as a layer inside of one of the other organs. You might consolidate it with something else. This is a little bit better. So the bandoneon, let's see what the accordion and harmonica. So this needs to get a release change, bring it out to at least a second. And the accordion. And now if we come back to this instrument. Right, we might rename this, we'll call this Bright Reeds. Right under reed organ, right? So this kind of game here. So this is the reed organ. These are bright reeds. We're just renaming things, right? So that we have some variety in our presets. Anyway, that's the basics of this. So you organize it the way you want to. You can change the bank and the presets and come up with what you want. Now I have a bonus here. What I've done is I've made 2 versions of this. I have one version which is just the organ samples. And then organ presets, but then I also made another one which represents sort of the sound set for a theater organ or like a Wurlitzer, And I was inspired by the tour of Nathan Barr, composer, film TV composer, did a tour on his channel over a year ago, and he also did a tour with Spitfire Audio on their Creative Cribs series, and he purchased the Wurlitzer organ from Fox Studios, the classic Wurlitzer that they had on their soundstage, and he refurbished it and put it together and added a whole bunch of other, instruments to it, and built a building, a recording studio, soundstage, where he can house this organ and then also record other instruments as well. And he showed the ins and outs of this thing, and it was just magnificent. And he demonstrated that you can really just orchestrate a full piece just for this theater organ, because it has percussion instruments in it as well. It's got cymbals, it's got drums, it's got keyboard instruments, mallet instruments, and a bunch of other effects and whatnot. So what I did is I made another version of this where I took out all the percussion instruments that I thought were relevant from the Fluid R3 Soundfont, and I included them with these new organ presets. So you can have your own Wurlitzer or your own theater organ, and I called it the Molten Theater organ. So you can play around with that as well, and I will play a sample of that for you right now, a demonstration of that Soundfont. So good luck with this and happy mixing, and I hope you enjoy these Soundfont modifications.